If you're interested in what I look like in real life and want to learn more about me, then follow my Instagram page at Joe the Insomniac. Hello everyone, hope you're all having a great day. Remember that even if things are tough now, they do get better and you can beat whatever problem you have right now. Hope you'll enjoy the video and take care. Now I work at a nursing home. Now it's pretty creepy being there in the daytime, but the night, man, there's something else about it. Almost like an electricity in the atmosphere that you could cut with a knife. Now I work security there, so I often don't have much trouble in terms of break-ins and stuff. Most of the internal stuff is dealt by the nurses. Now I often find most of my time spent on Facebook or other things on the internet. There's not really much to do, to be honest. You can check the cameras periodically, and I do so every 5 minutes. We have 16 in total to check. Now I'm the only one who works there. That's the only thing that puts me on edge. I always wished I at least had someone else to talk to, or to have some kind of backup outside of the cops if I really got in trouble, but hey, it is what it is. One thing that always struck out to me as odd is one particular night on a summer's day. We kept on getting reports off of the residents of a strange sound coming from different rooms at night, but no one could report exactly where the sound was coming from. It almost sounded as though there's a tapping sound directly above an empty room, but when I went to investigate, there was nothing there. It was, however, as I was coming back, that something really weird happened. Almost as if to mock me, I heard the same mocking sound after saying to myself, I knew it was nothing. And then there's a sudden drop in the temperature that I just can't describe. It was like somebody dropped me in ice cold water. And it wasn't just my mind. My whole body got covered in goosebumps, and the thermometer on my phone was telling me that the temperature had also dropped. It's really odd, but things got slightly more weird. Unfortunately, a patient had passed away in one of the rooms. I wasn't aware of this at the time though. I only found out a week later, and I was on a shift a few days after it happened. I was there checking out the cameras when I noticed that the screen seemed to be glitching slightly. There seemed to be some kind of flashing light coming from the room. Not like a light switch light, but almost a bluish glowing orb thing. I turned the screen on and off a couple of times and it went away. But I heard that damn knocking again. I then got up to investigate it, and as I did, I saw the lights flickering in that room that the patient had died in. Now I didn't know it at the time, so I went to investigate. I call out for anyone and get no reply. I have a horrible feeling of dread and I've never felt it since. I go and flick the light, but nothing happens. It won't turn on or off, it's just stuck off. I then could have swore that I felt someone's breath down my neck. Blaming it on myself for being paranoid, I quickly turn to get out of there, and as I do, the light switch comes on again and I hear it flick. Now I quickly go back to the desk and hide behind the cameras, assuring myself that I'll be safe here and I can watch if anything else happens. Luckily for me, nothing else happened that night. And I only found out later that the patient had died in there. But I can tell you, it damn made me resign when I realised what had happened. When I was in Afghanistan, we're in the mountains right on the Pakistan border. The first few months of the deployment were pretty hairy, but as soon as winter rolled around, the fighting season dried up. things get real quiet. Night shifts went from, where are we gonna get hit, to what kind of weird stuff am I gonna witness now? I think it's February or so, and I was on guard in the north-facing machine gun shack. We all had night vision devices, though it's pitch black. We were always wearing them. Well, I was looking out into the mountains when I see what appears to be a dude crawling out from behind a boulder up the hill about 100 meters away. Being February, we haven't got a hit in almost a month because of 2 feet of snow on the ground and the temps are hovering right around 0. So the Taliban chucked deuces back to Pakistan and left us alone for a few months. Now, this dude is on all fours, like an animal, just sitting there, behind a boulder, staring seemingly in my soul. I don't know how he can possibly see. I point the machine gun at him, and then turn on the visible laser, putting the laser right on his nose, and I don't get a reaction. The dude just stares at me, so now I'm getting freaked out. I'd been blown up, shot at, almost RPG'd, and now some locals playing mind games. I radio into our tactical operations centre that there's an unarmed local staring at me at the north post. And I either wanted someone to clear me, to wax him, or come figure out what I'm seeing. E5 on the radio tells me he's sending a private out to help me. Wow. The dude comes out, looks up the hill at this dude, and promptly notes out of there. Goes back to TOC and tells E5 that there's really a guy staring at us through the mountain range. So the E5 comes up the shack, and I point this dude out. And I'm not lying, as soon as the E5 gets eyes of the local, the dude jumps up, hops up on the boulder and starts screaming like somebody just dipped boiling water on him. Guard tower at the east corner can now see the guy, and as soon as the crazy local started howling, E-Shack loosens up about 30 burst rounds of 7.62 over his head. Now that's really loud when it's dead quiet, and the crazy guy jumps up off the rock, runs down the mountain screaming the whole way. It's now dead quiet for the rest of the night, with the commander up security 50%, meaning half the dudes on our outer outpost had to pull security the rest of the night. The running joke for the rest of the winter was to be on the lookout for the mind control experiment the CIA lost track of, freaking the life out of me. I work at a cafe in downtown. There's quite a few homeless shelters in range, and a huge drug problem. So one day I'm working behind the bar, and this redhead kid, probably in his early 20s, sits down in our seating area, starts talking under his breath. After a minute or two, he starts moving his hands around like he's casting a spell and gets up. Starts yelling and disturbing everyone. I walk over to him, telling him he needs to leave for the day. The dude looks me straight in the eyes and says, "It's all a game. I'm gonna kill you all with one finger." Now I think whatever. I get a death threat and a lot of other crap, but manage to get him away. Now fast forward to where we're closing up around 9 PM. I lock the doors and start heading towards a parking garage that my car's in. It's probably about 6 blocks away, no big deal. Though winter up here is insanely dark, so it's really pretty creepy in downtown. And we're about a block or two of walking out when I hear a hissing noise. I freak out because I can't see anyone. I pick up the pace a bit. Then I hear hurried footsteps in the snow behind me. Screw this. I booked it to the staircase from the garage because I wasn't going to wait for an elevator. I'm about to staircase up and heard the door I thought was just shut slam. I finally get to my car as quick as possible. I look around and lo and behold, there's a guy from earlier, but he's furious still. He sees me in the car and books it at full speed and starts hitting my window screaming, "I'm gonna kill you." I double check him, making sure that he can tell the door's locked, and I drive away. I call the cops the next morning and they found the dude. Apparently he thinks he's in the Illuminati and completely caboted my story to the police. He had some jail time and a restraining order, and I haven't seen him since. Working at a night shift in a care home, there's only 2 people working at night. We get everyone to bed and tidy up, then sit down and watch TV and answer if they need anything from the residents' bell. So it's about 2 in the morning. The bell rings. This is weird, as the home's in the countryside about 10 miles away from the nearest village. We go to investigate and find a man at the front door. He says if he can use the phone as his car's broken down. He isn't allowed in, but we offer to phone a tow truck for him. He agrees. We go and get the phone, and when we come back, he's gone. Weird, but we think maybe he's gone to his car or something, and we sit back down, but can see through the corridor that the man's now inside, standing in the TV room. He didn't see us, so we run and hide. We still have the phone to call the cops, but they take a while. About 15 minutes later they show up. We let them in, calm us down, and search everywhere, but the man's nowhere to be found. We call the management to send some more staff out to stay with us during the night. The manager arrives, the police leave, and we're back watching TV and chatting a bit calmer now. We then hear the front door open and close, go to investigate, call the cops again, look out the window and see the man sprinting away. He's been in the home the entire time the cops are there hiding. What's more, he didn't even have a car. I have no idea what he wanted, but I'm sure glad I don't work nights anymore. I hit church time towards the end of the project, and there's a lot of people in the building just chugging away at their deadlines commonly until 5 to 6 a.m. So not night shift, but close enough. It hits 4:45 a.m. and I decide to head off for some sleep to then come back in for 10 a.m. Say bye to some friends and promptly begin heading back home, which is barely 10 minutes away. As I walk across the car park, I spot a guy walking on the pavement, way on the opposite side, dressed in a full black tracksuit with his hood up and cap down. Naturally just a suspicious guy, and me being kinda small, I kept an eye on him. I hit just towards the other 2 buildings on my other side, and I can hear him shouting. I turn my head to look, and he's aiming it at me, very hostile. I'm unable to make out the words he's using. I quickly turn my head. I pick up the pace, walking between buildings, and decide to look back over my shoulder. There he was, arms up in the air, walking maniacally towards me in the centre of the road. Now I should add here, the car park we have is very big, and there would have been no way the guy could have crossed it in a minute or 2 that it took me to be where I was without running. This guy was definitely here to terrorize me at least. I've never been stalked before, and at this point my options are to run, walk to the dorm where the students should be, keep going home, or go back to my work building. Now I really don't want to get chased close to 5 a.m. to be trapped outside a building with a guy that looks really big. especially as it's so dark where I am. I finally go with going back to my workplace to avoid being turned back on myself and finding him in a darker alley. So I just keep walking and pick up the pace. Not enough to be obvious, but to be able to keep distance. I walk past the dorms, turning onto the main road where the streetlights are, and I immediately took out my phone to ring my co-workers. I literally blew up his phone as I kept my other hand in my pocket but wrapped around my keys, so if it turned nasty I'd have a weapon. Thankfully after 6 minutes, my co-worker picked up, immediately running out to me standing on the phone. I ended up dashing into the first takeaway place that was open and just stood there waiting for my co-worker. The guy never followed me down the turn I took to get to this takeaway. He must have kept on walking, scurrying off. I walked home, and whilst I was a little nervous walking home late at night afterwards, I'm not afraid to do it again. I'm just more cautious now, and often tell someone when I'm about to head off that I'll message them when I go home. I'm glad I haven't seen him since. I worked nights all day at a semi-wanky hotel next to the airport. One night I got a call from a lady in 204. She says there was arguing, loud noises and crying coming out of 206. I checked the computer. No one's checked into that room due to maintenance issues. The hell? I call my supervisor to see what to do next, and she tells me to go and get security and follow them up with a key. No thanks. But I decide to be the bigger man and go up anyway. As we get off the elevator we hear crying. It's loud, My heart starts racing as we near the door, so I hand the key to the security guard. The next 5 minutes seem to happen in slow motion. He opens the door and immediately flicks the light on. Now keep in mind, in 206 we're on the second floor. Only one door in by me, and it's like 3 AM with no one around. As we enter the room, the shower's on and steam's coming from under the door. There is only one lamp on in the room that's super cold, and there's a lady facing the wall away from us. As Frankie approaches, he says, "Is everything okay?" And she stopped crying and rolled over. She's covered in blood, just staring at us. That's when we realised the shower had stopped and the door was open, and there's a 6'5" man standing in the doorway. As we turned around, the cops tased him and arrested him. I still have no idea what happened, and it made me never go back to that hotel again. I hit church time towards the end of the project, and there's a lot of people in the building just chugging away at their deadlines commonly until 5 to 6 AM, so not night shift but close enough. It hits 4:45 AM and I decide to head off for some sleep to then come back in for 10 AM, say bye to some friends and promptly begin heading back home, which is barely 10 minutes away. As I walk across the car park, I spot a guy walking on the pavement, way on the opposite side, dressed in a full black tracksuit with his hood up and cap down. Naturally just a suspicious guy, and me being kinda small, I kept an eye on him. I hit just towards the other two buildings on my other side, and I can hear him shouting. I turn my head to look, and he's aiming it at me, very hostile. I'm unable to make out the words he's using. I quickly turn my head. I pick up the pace, walking between buildings, and decide to look back over my shoulder. There he was, arms up in the air, walking maniacally towards me in the centre of the road. Now I should add here, the car park we have is very big, and there would have been no way the guy could have crossed it in a minute or two that it took me to be where I was without running. This guy was definitely here to terrorize me at least. I've never been stalked before, and at this point my options are to run, walk to the dorm where the students should be, keep going home, or go back to my work building. Now I really don't want to get chased close to 5 AM to be trapped outside a building with a guy that looks really big. Especially as it's so dark where I am. I finally go with going back to my workplace to avoid being turned back on myself and finding him in a darker alley. So I just keep walking and pick up the pace. Not enough to be obvious, but to be able to keep distance. I walk past the dorms, turning onto the main road where the streetlights are, and I immediately took out my phone to ring my co-workers. I literally blew up his phone as I kept my other hand in my pocket but wrapped around my keys, so if it turned nasty I'd have a weapon. Thankfully after 6 minutes, my co-worker picked up, immediately running out to me standing on the phone. I ended up dashing into the first takeaway place that was open and just stood there waiting for my co-worker. The guy never followed me down the turn I took to get to this takeaway. He must have kept on walking, scurrying off. I walked home, and whilst I was a little nervous walking home late at night afterwards, I'm not afraid to do it again. I'm just more cautious now, and often tell someone when I'm about to head off that I'll message them when I go home. I'm glad I haven't seen him since. I worked at a night zoo. The place was pretty darn creepy at night, but I have never seen anything. But my friend recounted me this story. One night he was at the front desk when a nice young lady comes up to him and gushes about how awesome the night zoo is. She goes on about the atmosphere and whatnot, saying, "I saw a red monkey that was in a tree with long hair swinging its legs. Wow, did not expect the zoo to have free-ranging wildlife." This sent off a few alarm bells. First, monkeys are nocturnal animals. That's why we have none in the night zoo. Second, all zoos are quarantined somehow to prevent external wildlife from entering due to diseases and whatnot. Third, a red monkey with long hair swings its legs. I mean, come on. There were no monkeys in the zoo that night, and none of them are nocturnal. Who wants to see a bunch of sleeping monkeys? Yes, a wild monkey may have climbed in, but the chances of that are so slim. I'm from an Asian country, so a humanoid figure could well be a ghost we call Pateron, which is a female ghost with long hair. The colour? Well, I don't know of any official colours of a ghost. It's late at night, and someone says they saw something watching them from a tree. Now, either it was something paranormal, or that lady was completely out of it. All I know is I'm glad it wasn't me she come up to in the dead of night like that. I think either possibility is just as scary as each other. I used to work at a relatively small security company. It was privately owned, having about 30 employees altogether. They'd get a contract with a factory, and then basically your job was to sit in the factory for 8 to 12 hours while no one was working in it. So I'd sit by myself, alone, overnight in a completely abandoned factory. In my 2 years of doing that job, I never had one single thing happen to me that I'd call paranormal or supernatural. However, I did have Dave. One night my captain calls me on my phone and tells me that a new trainee would be coming in around 5 AM and to show him the ropes, teach him how to make rounds, etc. So it's about 4:45 a.m. and I step outside the parking lot to have a smoke and wait on the new guy. After about 10 minutes, a car pulls up, stops, backs up and drives away. I was clearly visible, so I have no idea why he left. The car passed by about 3 or 4 more times before finally pulling in, then shutting off the engine. I can see him in the car, and he is just sitting in the driver's seat staring at me. In the back seat are 2 kids, probably 6 to 8 years old. After about 3 minutes of me wondering what's going on, he finally gets out. Now he's weird looking. Dave's 4'10" and larger than anyone I've ever seen. He has a huge rash covering 70% of his body with a white crust outlining it. He then speaks. Had a little trouble finding here. His voice is high-pitched. I mean really high-pitched. I'm talking Judge Doom in the final scene of Who Framed Roger Rabbit high pitch. Then he extends his hand to shake mine. Without much thinking, I shake it. There's 1 finger on it. 1. And the rest of his hands look kind of stumpy. One of the kids gets out of the car having the same rash, also fat and fingers missing, says, "Can I get a drink?" He turns around and screams to get back in the car. I'm in shock. So I take the guy around the factory, showing him the perimeter, telling him where the emergency stuff is. About a minute into our walk, I notice how the guy smells awful. I mean literally reeks. The whole time he says strange questions like, "Do you have a crush on anyone that works in here? Can I hunt on the property, etc." He finally leaves after standing in the office trying to make small talk for a good 15 minutes. On his way out he said, "We're going to be good friends, even if you don't know it." I went home about 2 hours later and stood in the shower for a good solid hour, washing myself trying to get the image of that guy out of my head. I called my captain and said to him to reassign me to a complete new area. I'd seen enough of him. It's been a good 10 years since that and it still bothers me. I hesitated when they offered me the job at McDonald's as a night shift manager. I'd already worked at the store for 6 months, but that was during the day. I rarely worked after dark, and I talked to co-workers who had super busy, understandingly awful, rowdy customers. Those are the general complaints, and I figured that's why the night shift manager position had such a high turnover rate. In 6 months, there'd been 4 new managers, and every single one of them had quit. The last one out was Jesse, a guy who used to work the afternoons and would always come in higher. He did it so often that I'd assume that was just how he was. And one day he come in sober, and I thought, damn, I see why they hired him. It didn't surprise me too much to see when he accepted the promotion. The one benefit of the position was that there's no one on you. No mystery shoppers. The general manager's at home asleep, and you could pretend the ice cream machines are broken all you wanted, and no one's gonna call out for it. What did surprise me was when he quit. Barely a week in. He didn't even put in a notice. He walked out of the store in the middle of this shift and never came back. His final paycheck was gathering dust in the back of the office, and no one ever managed to get in touch with him. And that's when they offered me the position. I had my doubts, sure, but I just turned 19. I had no idea what I wanted to do in life, and the pay was nearly double my salary as a regular crew member. So I took the job, underwent about a week of training, and the next thing I knew, I was in charge of the place from 11 to 11, 5 nights a week. It wasn't bad. My hours got changed to 11 to 7 and I enjoyed it more. For the first 3 hours, I would have an extra worker in the kitchen and another one up front to take orders and hand food out in the window. They both left at 3, and then the store was empty except for me and Miram, the only cook in the kitchen. She's a short, quiet, middle-aged woman who had been working there for a decade. She didn't speak English too well, but I understood her fine. It was around 4, one Saturday night, and I understood why Jessie left. The line outside was gone and the parking lot was empty. The floor and tables in the lobby were spotless, untouched since the janitor had left. The only sound was the constant hum of the fryers. I knew I had to do things though. I still need to reboot the computer system, count the registers, but I took a moment to stand by the front counter, looking out into the lobby that closed each night at 11. I wasn't looking at anything in particular, but my eyes settled on the reflection in the window. I saw something move underneath one of the booth tables. My eyesight wasn't great, so I leaned over the counter that I could squint and just about see things. Now I knew I wasn't imagining things. I saw a girl's legs sticking out horizontally underneath a table. She had snow white shoes, the type nurses wear. Her legs were bare, but I couldn't see anything above her kneecaps. The back of her heels rested on the floor, and her toes pointed towards the ceiling. Then the toes of the shoes started to sway back and forth like listening to music. I watched her for a moment. Was she hurt? Is this a prank? People have walked into the lobby after closing before, looking to order or use the bathroom. Never like this. I've never seen them act like this ever. They'd usually come right up to the front counter. I'd say sorry, lobby's closed, and that's the end of it, but not this. Hey, I shouted. Lobby's closed. My voice echoed through the building, and as soon as I yelled it, the legs froze in place. For a moment, they both laid on the floor completely still. The girl under the table drew them in close, one at a time. They're far enough within the booth that I can no longer see them. I figure she's getting up and waited to show herself but never did. I shout again, I know you're there, but nothing happened. I sighed and lowered my headset around my neck and walked into the lobby. She was gonna have to acknowledge me whether she wanted to or not. But when I turned the corner and made it to the booth, no one was underneath. I looked under the other tables and saw no one. I took a wide scanning of the whole lobby. Besides Ram in the kitchen, the place is empty. I sat there for a while, my feet frozen to the floor, and eventually I sighed and walked back towards the counter, trying not to dwell on the fact that I'd imagined a pair of legs under the table for at least a minute. I wasn't going crazy, I'm just tired. I sighed and put the headset back on, and when I was sure no one had pulled into the drive-thru, I double-checked the entrances to make sure all the doors are locked. They already are. If there was really a girl hiding somewhere in the store, she would have been hiding for at least the past 5 hours. That's insane. I would have noticed her before. I took another glancing look past the lobby as I walked back around the counter and paused. In the reflection of the glass, I see one of the white shoes laying on the floor. I can't see anyone else. No one's under the booth. I turned around to get Miram's attention, but she wasn't in the kitchen now. She must have gone to the stockroom for supplies. I turned back around trying to get the best angle for the reflection, but from behind the counter, I can only see shadows below the table, and of course, the shoe lying beside it. A moment later, a small pale hand reached out from the darkness, grabs the shoe and pulls it back under the table without a sound. I almost forgot to breathe. I stared at the reflection from an entirely different angle, waiting for someone to poke out again. Another sign that this is real. I don't know how long it took me to realize the phone was ringing. Ram called my name from the office. When I turned around, she was walking over to hand me the still ringing landline phone. I gave another look towards the reflection in the window before taking the phone, allowing myself to relax again. I see nothing. It's late. I'm exhausted, going crazy. I decide to thank Maram and answer the call. I didn't expect much. At this point in the night, no well-intended person would ever call us. It's usually a mistake or some kids pulling a prank, or someone who wasn't sure we're open 24/7 wanting to call before they drove here. But I knew from the moment that I had heard the caller's voice that something's different. Help me, please. A young soft voice trembled on the line. A little girl. My eyes drift across the lobby to the reflection in the window. Who is this? I'm stuck, she said. I didn't see anything unusual near the booth at this time, and she repeats, I'm stuck under the table. Where are you? I said very shakily. Help me get out. I'm stuck, I can't get out, she replies. I could feel the hairs on the back of my neck standing up, and my vision goes hyper-focused. Where once a reflection is blurry, I can now see it with perfect clarity. Nothing happened though, nothing moved from under the table, but the voice on the phone keeps begging for help. Please sir, I've been stuck here for so long. I almost hung up right then and there. If I had though, I think I would have pretended nothing happened. And if the phone rang again, I wouldn't have answered it. But this wasn't the sort of thing anyone could ignore, and I had this feeling crawling through my skin that I could hang up the phone as much as I wanted. But she wasn't going to stop calling. I went back into the lobby. I didn't walk any slower than usual, but it seemed to take forever to make it to the booth. I kept thinking about Jesse, how he'd suddenly disappeared without explanation. I then crouched down and looked under the table, and no one's there. I gave a shaky sigh of relief. The voice on the phone felt so fake now, obviously a prank caller, one who happened to have picked up at the same time as me. Nice one, idiot, I said. I then cut the phone off. But I can see you now, she said, sounding honestly confused. I'm right next to you. You're wearing a red and black uniform and a visor. Yeah, obviously, I said. And she said, and your eyes are brown, and you don't have a name tag. Her descriptions kept going, to the point where she described the way I was crouching down, the shape of my nose, and the tremble on my hands. I looked to the window again, trying to see past my own reflection into the parking lot outside. Someone's watching me from the outside, I told myself, but I was wrong. The reflection is all I need to see. In it was the girl's face peeking out an inch or two from the table. She stared at me, nearly an arm's length away, her lips moving in sync with the words I heard through the phone. I jerked away from her, stumbling back against a chair. I dropped the phone to the floor. I can still hear the pitch in her voice, but no sound whatsoever emerging from under the booth itself. There was nothing there, nothing but floor tiles and support beams for the table. I looked back into the glass and I could see her there, clear as day, looking up at me with black eyes. Her mouth suddenly moved soundlessly. I now grabbed the phone and ran back behind the counter, my heart pounding in my chest. my throat, my head. I'm struggling to breathe. I look back at the window, and there she is again, watching me with her head poking out of the booth. She frowned, and you can see tears dripping down her face. Why'd you leave me? I thought you were gonna help me. I'm stuck. She kept going, and I started listening more, feeling very sick. I was snapped out of it by Miram calling my name from the kitchen. I turned around to see her watching with narrow eyes. You okay? For a moment, I had no idea how to answer that. I looked back at the window, seeing nothing. There was no way in hell I'd imagined all of that. I placed the phone to my ear and heard the girl screaming again. It was almost comforting. She's real. I can hear her. I told Miram about the girl under the table and her voice on the phone. I must have been talking too fast because she couldn't understand me, so I hand her the phone and tell her to listen, but she hears nothing. I can hear the girl humming to herself now. That's all I remembered. Next thing I knew, I woke up in the back of an ambulance. Apparently, I had an episode of psychosis due to stress, and I can tell you it is the most terrifying thing that ever happened to me. Even though none of it was real, I still have nightmares about it to this day.